Oh man, it's been a minute since I've had a gaming rant, but don't worry, Sony ponies, it's not about you. So we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 and how you're never gonna actually own the console or the games. So let's talk about it. So for anybody who's been following gaming as long as I have, you'll know that there seems to be this generational shift with companies that make consoles where after they make a very successful console, they seem to just shit the bed on the second console, at least for the beginning of the console's life, and even in some cases all the way to the end of that console's life. A good example of this would be the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3. The PlayStation 2 was a masterclass in how to follow up an early adopter gaming console from a new company in the space. The PS1 was great, but the PS2 was and still is the most sold console of all time, being rivaled only by the Nintendo Switch. But then with Sony's ego at an all-time high, we had the PS3 come out, and the PS3 came out at $599, and eventually it did outsell the Xbox 360 by the end of the generation, but for most of that generation, because of its price, because game developers hated making games for it right up until the very end because of the complicated cell processor, and because it had the same desoldering GPU issue that the 360 had, it was being outsold by the easier to develop for, cheaper, and still plagued by the red ring of death, Xbox 360. Then, in that same generation, we had the Wii, which outsold both the PS3 and the Xbox 360 by a huge margin, because instead of focusing specifically on gamers, which is what the Xbox did and subsequently the PS3, Nintendo basically pointed that console at everyone, and everyone bought it. And they included Wii Sports, they just did everything they possibly could, and they did it right. But then Nintendo followed that success up with the Wii U, which a lot of people mistook as an accessory for the Wii because the big marketing push was the screen controller. You had the screen on a controller and you could play the games away from the television, and people just thought that it was an accessory for the Wii. Not actually the case. And then, of course, there's the most infamous example of this generational shift, which was the Xbox 360 to the Xbox One. Because when Microsoft launched the original Xbox, it was kind of an experiment for them to see if they could compete with the PS2 and the Nintendo GameCube, and they did a good enough job that they could justify a follow-up generation. And when they did, they were able to make it to market sooner and cheaper than the PlayStation 3. Microsoft was actually beating Sony for most of that console generation, and it was only by the end of that generation, as Sony began to cut prices on the PS3 and game developers started to leverage the hardware better, that it finally managed to outsell Microsoft at 87 million compared to 84 million units. So from the beginning to the end, at least between the PS3 and the Xbox 360, that generation was a very close race. But then, because Microsoft felt like they were on top of the world, they decided to do this.
TV, Xbox, go home.
TV, Call of Duty.
Our new dog model is taken from high-resolution scans of an actual SEAL Team service dog.
Yep. Don't talk about games until the very, very end of your keynote and talk about TV the entire time, and then sell an oversized, overpriced, always-on required, camera-attached, basically TV box. And oh, also it plays games.
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Microsoft still has not recovered from those blunders, and you can see how desperate they are to now just shift focus to being a services company that also happens to sell hardware instead of a hardware company that makes good hardware to play games on. This generational shift can be observed through multiple different console generations with multiple different consoles, and it seems that that's going to be what happens with the Switch 2. Let me explain. As I mentioned earlier, the Nintendo Switch is actually giving the PS2 a run for its money when it comes to the most sold console ever. It's kind of wild to think, but it also makes sense because I've owned 3 Nintendo Switches myself, and I know several people who have a Switch Lite when they travel and have a standard Switch at home, and I mean, it just sells well as a toy that you can play games on. And at the end of the day, that is kind of what Nintendo started as, and that is still what they are, a toy maker. I mean, hell, if you believe the rumors, Nintendo had the Switch 2 ready for a while and just didn't release it because the Switch 1 was still selling really well. But when we finally did get the Nintendo Switch 2 announcement, we didn't really get much detail, but we did get more detail once we waited a little bit longer to watch Nintendo Direct. But after we watched the announcement at Nintendo Direct, well, things still weren't super clear, but we at least had some more features and some gimmicks like the C button and the mouse controls with the controllers. But we didn't know the price of the games or the console until we went on the website. And then we went to the website. $450 for a Nintendo branded version of what the Steam Deck has basically been doing for multiple years now. And on top of that, $80 games. Sure, some are gonna be $70, but $80 games. Why? Because you have to now charge more since you decided not to just rebrand a game from 2014 and sell it again. I'm looking at you, Mario Kart. I mean, for God's sakes, Bethesda, the company responsible for the money pit that is Fallout 76, gave us a full-blown remaster of Oblivion for $50 with all of the DLC included, including horse armor. And yet you're gonna charge us $80 because you finally decided to make a new Mario Kart with an open world environment that, by the way, Forza has been doing in the Horizon series for years now. But because you do it with Mario, you're gonna basically charge us $10 to $20 more. Because that makes sense. But there's more. Remember how people got upset about the 1-2 Switch game costing money when the original Switch came out because it was basically just a tech demo for the Nintendo Switch? Well, now if you want an actual tech demo and guided tour for the Switch 2, you have to pay $10. Like, this is the company that included one of the most popular games of all time, Wii Sports, in the box with your Wii. And now they're gonna charge you $10 to take a guided tour of your new $450 console. What timeline are we living in? But I mean, there is a good thing, and I praised this when I did my original video on the Switch 2, which is that you can at least still buy physical cartridges for the console, right? Right? Mother. So yes, many people have pointed out that it's not going to be every cartridge. I'm aware that it's not every cartridge that's going to be this way, but the fact that there are going to be cartridges where they don't have the game on them, but instead they have a license key that you put into the console, it tells the console which game to download, and then you just download it, means that at any point when the servers go down for the Switch 2, those cartridges are going to be worthless plastic e-waste. And before anybody goes to the comments and hits me with the, oh, you're thinking too far ahead, the servers will be around for a while, you can still download stuff, may I remind you that the DS store came out in 2009 and was killed off in 2023. So that's 14 years of support. And when they took the store offline, it was gone. You cannot download anything on there. So any games that were exclusively digital are gone forever. That is lost media, period. And yes, I know the DS store is more of an example of digital purchases going wrong, but now imagine 14 years from now when you buy a physical cartridge for your 14-year-old Switch 2 and you put the cartridge in and nothing happens because those cartridges are pulling from a server that no longer exists. When my Nintendo Switch 1 turns 14, I will still be able to buy a copy of Tears of the Kingdom and throw it in there, and even without an update, I'll be able to play it. Will it perform as well? Probably not, because there's been performance improvements. Will it get all the latest updates? Maybe not if they took those servers offline, but the point is, I can still play that game. You won't be able to do that with those keycard examples, which reduces the amount of games that you can buy because yes, there are going to still be games with them on the cartridge. But it still reduces the number of games that'll be around once the servers go offline. So because this nightmare scenario is a potential future for the Switch 2, the next logical step for people who are more tech savvy than I am is to try and find a way to jailbreak, modify, or reverse engineer the Switch and its games. But hold your horses, because if you try to do that and Nintendo picks it up, they can take your $450 piece of hardware that you purchased, you spent real world money for, and they can brick it. Just take it away from you. Physically take it away from you. Not like come to your house and take it away, though I wouldn't put it past them because, I mean, God knows if Nintendo has Yakuza ties. But my point is, they can actually keep you from playing the console that you purchased, and if you happen to sign their EULA, which they've updated recently, you have, in many ways, signed away your right to enter a class action lawsuit with them. And I mean, frankly, this whole thing is just them showing who they truly are. And There was a point that I saw where I can kind of see where they would take this extreme approach. The comment basically pointed out that Nintendo really did go to the dark side after seeing over 1 million people playing Tears of the Kingdom on Yuzu before the game launched on the Nintendo Switch. And I could definitely see that. And while that can be damaging to the company, and I'm not going to say it wasn't damaging to the company, having the company retaliate in a way that is just extremely damaging to the future of gaming is not the right approach. But here's the thing. I can sit here and say all day long that this is going to irreparably damage the gaming market. This could potentially crash the gaming market. Nintendo is creating a console that will eventually result in who knows how many pieces of lost media, and on and on and on about the problems. But it's not going to matter because the Nintendo Switch 2 pre-orders cleared out within the first day of going live. And I know the reason why. And I'm not saying this to be mean, but the reason why is because of casual gamers. Because casual gamers don't look at the broader impact that this will have on the gaming industry or how it's going to affect game prices and future game preservation. They go, oh, I loved my original Switch. I bought multiples of them and my kids have them, and man, the Switch is more expensive now than it used to be, but that must be the cost of advancement. And oh, the games are a bit more expensive, but Nintendo said it's because the games cost more to develop, so I'll believe them. And so they sell like hotcakes and the casual gamer buys them. Because like I said earlier, Nintendo is a toy company. The Famicom was a computer toy. The Switch was a portable gaming toy. And so for average people, the hype built up around the console outweighs the bullshit that Nintendo will do and partake in that screws over the rest of the gaming industry as a whole. At the end of the day, for me, I have a Switch OLED, and that is going to be the last Nintendo console that I'm going to buy. Because for me, I believe in voting with your wallet, and this is going to have a massive effect on the gaming industry as a whole because the Switch was a watershed moment for Nintendo. They single-handedly popularized the portable gaming space. And of course, the Switch was far surpassed by other devices like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally or the Lenovo Legion Go, but it popularized the portable gaming space in a way that the PSP barely did and the PS Vita wishes it could have. But now they're riding that hype into the ground and making choices that will mean that we will have terabytes of lost media, a horrible precedent set for game prices, and an even worse precedent set for how games are put onto cartridges or physical media to be played in consoles. I hope I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that I won't be, and I guess once the Switch 2 launches and once the Switch 2 servers go offline in another 14 years, if I'm still here making videos in my 40s, then I guess we'll see. But until then, those are my thoughts on the Switch 2 and why the Switch 1 is going to be the last Nintendo console I buy until they fix these problems. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about this whole situation. Let me know in the comments down below, and if you have any suggestions for things you'd like to see next, or anything else that you want to say, as long as they're not super mean, leave them down in the comments. If you enjoyed this kind of content, definitely leave a like. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. I post a short every single day now, except for the days that I post big videos like this one. So if you like this kind of stuff, stick around and I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.